It's about 9:30 in the morning. The sun's now high enough that I can get pretty consistent results with the cyanotype. So I'm going to do another test strip, and test strips should generally be a way of life with these chemical-based processes. Anyway, from my experience the last couple of days making cyanotypes, 2 minutes seems to be a long enough period of time that I'll be able to see some variation in the test strip. So I'm going to expose the cyanotype for 2 minutes, set my timer. Get rid of that little piece of tape there. This is the anthotype that I'm working on later today. It will be a full week that this has been exposed out in the sun, so I might actually check the exposure a little bit later today. You can see the cyanotypes reacted to light already. I made my first cyanotype when I was a Cub Scout. A few years ago at Chico State, we had 33 third graders in our darkroom making cyanotypes, and every one of them went home with a successful piece. Okay, there's my 2 minutes, so I'm going to expose that a little bit again, so let's repeat this process. So this will now be 4 minutes and then 2 minutes, and I'll try to build this test strip up a little bit and give us a few variations in exposure. Obviously I'm going to edit some of this out so you don't have to watch this for 2 minutes at a time. But this is an important step. It's going to save you time and it's going to save you money. Okay, there's another 2 minutes, so let's reset this and move that again. So you can see the difference. So this will now be 6, 4, and 2 minutes each. I'm doing this test strip without anything on top of it. I don't have a negative on top of it. And what this is going to do is going to give me a base exposure so I can see how many seconds it takes to get the deepest, darkest blue that I can. And that's going to tell me as I layer things on top of that to block the light, things will get lighter from that, but it will give me an exposure that I can use at least for a while I make a photogram, that I can layer things on top and have a sense of what the exposure should be to get my maximum blue. As with these processes, the longer exposure, the darker the print. Okay, another 2 minutes. So I should have between 2 and 8 minutes exposure. And we'll try one more after this one. Okay, another 2 minutes. So let's repeat this one more time. And so I'll have 2 minutes to 10 minutes. After this, we'll go in and process it, see what it looks like. If I need to make another test strip to fine-tune it, we'll do that then. I should tell you that each batch of emulsion is a little bit different. When I say that, when you mix the two chemicals up, the potassium ferrocyanate and the ferric ammonium citrate, unless you get the exact amount, if you have a little variance, it's going to make subtle little changes, and that sometimes affects exposure, sometimes affects contrast. So you want to be as consistent as possible, but even as the cyanotype material ages, it will change its sensitivity to light. So it is sort of a constant variable, if that makes sense. Okay, there's 10 minutes, so I'm going to stop this exposure. I'm going to take this in and process it, and we'll come back out in a minute and we'll look at it. So here's my test strip processed. There's the 2 minutes, 4 minutes, 6, 8, and 10. And you can see just very subtle variations between 8 and 10. In fact, actually from 6 on, it's pretty difficult to tell. 10 does seem to be just slightly darker than 8. So if I want to build a photogram, which I do next, and so what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a piece of sensitized paper and build things on top of it. I'm going to do that fairly quickly, either that or I do it in the shade and then bring it out into the sun. So if the things can easily move, I'll do that. And so anyway, that's our next step. So here's my photogram. I've just started a 10-minute exposure based on my test strip I made a minute ago. And hopefully my cheese doesn't stick to the paper surface, but other than that, we'll check back in 10 minutes. We're at the 5-minute mark. You can see the change in color in the cyanotype, and that cheese is looking kind of melty. We're coming up on 10 minutes, and in just a minute I'll take this in and process it. In a few minutes we'll look at the results. There we go. So it's still wet, so I'm getting a little reflection here, but here's what it looks like untoned. I'll come back in a minute with a toned version. Still wet, this is the toned version. You can see it's a deeper, darker, richer blue. It's interesting too that the cheese ended up being somewhat translucent rather than opaque, and indeed seemed to chemically react a little bit as it sweated. So I'm going to make another cyanotype here rather quickly. I'm going to try to set it up because I'm doing it in the sun. But I'm going to do this with objects that I know don't lie flat and might have some translucence. And we'll just kind of see what that looks like. Try something like that. And we'll just see what it looks like, and set the exposure for 10 minutes, and we'll check back when it's processed. There it is, unprocessed. There's a developed version. To my estimation, tiny bit overexposed. I could do this again rather than 10 minutes, maybe do it 6 or 7 minutes, and I'd probably pick up a little more of the detail and texture there, and then the glass there that kind of got blown out a little bit with this exposure. Gives you some idea how translucent and or three-dimensional objects can work in a photogram.